Hey class, in this video we are going to cover audio layering and mixing. This is really just a couple things, automation and our mix bus. So I'll go over a couple things here and we'll finalize our mix and kind of save our session and export our track. I'll do a separate video on submitting the project just so keep those parts separate. So let's just go straight into Audition. So the first thing we're going to look at is automation. Automation is sort of like animating different properties like the volume or pan or effects over time. And this is basically a better way to do mixing than last time we kind of added, or in the past we've used these like little fade in and out, and those are really nice to use for like a quick fade in, quick fade out. But we don't have a lot of control over those, and we can't add fades inside the clip and stuff like that. So that's where automation comes in. So I'm just going to undo these on these tracks for now. And we'll start over. So when we look at these tracks, let's look at our modem first. When we look at these tracks, we can set the overall track volume here and the track pan here. So if we set the track volume to 0, when we listen to it, it'll be a little bit louder. And if I turn the track volume down to like -12, it's going to be a bit quieter. With the pan, we haven't actually talked about this yet, but because our speakers and headphones and stuff have two sides, we can pan from right to left. If you're wearing headphones, this will sound very clear. If you're not, it might not. But if I pan this track all the way to the right, we just hear it on the right headphone. And if I pan this track, I'm going to solo this for a second. If I pan this track all the way to the left, then it's just going to be in the left headphone. So this just sets the value and it just kind of stays there throughout the duration of the track. And that's fine for a lot of things, but another thing we can do is automate changes in volume or pan or other things over time. And so that's good for doing fade in. It's good for doing like multiple fade in and out over the course of a track, and generally just kind of like layering our tracks together so they're not in the same sort of audio space. So you've probably clicked on this yellow line maybe by mistake sometimes as you've been editing. It's very easy to you're trying to move the track and you accidentally do something like that. I actually don't really, the yellow line is the volume, and you can automate the volume using the yellow line. It's kind of imposed on the track to make it easier to see, or not easier to see rather. It's harder to see, but it's easier just to edit everything together. But you can actually take that out. So if you go to view, you can turn the envelopes off. I actually tend to do this. I didn't do this earlier because I was just going over stuff, but I actually kind of tend to turn these little thingies off to make the view cleaner. You can even turn off all these controls and stuff like that. You have a lot of control over the view if you want to. But where I tend to edit these, and you don't have to edit it this way, but there's a little drop down here where it says read, and if I open this up, we see this other drop down with show envelopes, and we can turn on these envelopes like volume and pan, and then we can edit them there. And there's a little keyframing interface that you can use. So if you've ever done any animation, you can also select here. If you've ever done any animation, you might have done some keyframing. This is something that we're actually going to talk about in a lot more depth in our next unit, which is animation. But what we can see here is, let's start with the volume. So if I have this volume, it's set to -12, and let's say I want to add a little fade out. Instead of just dragging this guy here, I can do it here. So if I hover over where I want the fade to start, I can click and it'll add a little blue dot called the keyframe. That just saves the value that I want there. And then I can add another blue dot over here, and then I can move this, and it'll create a slope for me where it's going to automate the change in volume between those two dots. So let's listen back to that. Welcome to the MMP. So you can hear that noise fading out towards the end. So even though the sound is getting louder, we've automated it out. And we can do this as many times as we want. So let's say we wanted to really emphasize a certain part of the audio. maybe just as an example, maybe I want to make this part a little bit louder. I can add a little key in here and then put one next to it and bring this up, and then kind of move this guy like that, and then bring another one down here like this. And so I can add these kind of changes in volume as many times as I want throughout the course of the track. I probably will undo this because it's a little goofy, but just as an example. And notice you can actually see the volume changing over here as we automate, and we can see it
to the
going
MMP
down here.
100.
So that's the basic idea of automation. I'm going to undo this stuff. And if you want to just completely clear, there's a little erase button that'll just get rid of all of those keyframes. But now I can do like a really quick fade out, and I can make more fine adjustments to it using those little dots. So another thing I can automate is the pan from right to left. That might be kind of fun. So let's turn off our volume envelope and turn on our pan envelope. So that blue line represents the pan between left and right. It's in the middle, so it's like balanced. But what I could do is I could add a dot. Let's add a dot here. And let's add a couple dots. And let's drag one all the way down here, all the way to the right, and one all the way up here, all the way to the left. And we'll hear the sound effect moving across the stereo image as we play back.
Welcome to the MMP.
So that's a pretty cool effect. People don't use it that much, but you can do kind of interesting things with the pan. So those are just a couple examples of things we can automate. Let's automate our music track because there's more stuff that I will want to do there. So I want to add a big fade in. Let's open this drop down and let's bring up our volume envelope. So I turned it off, and let's bring this down a little bit. And I'm going to add a dot right here, because that's where I want to kind of get the loudest or actually it's a little back here. I want to line this up with my speaking voice. And what I want to do is I want to get louder until I get to the speaking voice, and then I want to go back down. So I'm going to add another dot down here and do this long fade in. Okay, so that's a good fade in, and then I want this to be a little bit louder, but then as soon as I start speaking, I want to bring it back down so I'm not covering up my voice.
Welcome to the MMP.
So I want to bring it down a little bit faster and a little bit farther down.
Welcome to the MMP.
That was a little too fast. Let's bring this guy out and this guy back a little bit.
Welcome to the
Okay,
MMP
so that's a pretty good
100
transition. So I could go and add more fade in and out. Maybe sort of towards the end here, I could bring the music back up. So I could add a dot here. Sometimes I add a dot just to keep this flat, and then I add another dot over here, because if I just added this dot, I would make like a big long slope, but I want to keep it flat until I get here, and then we're going to fade it back in, and then a little fade out at the end.
So there are lots of ums and ahs.
Okay, so it's a little too loud. We can see we're kind of clipping, so we don't want to go above 0. Okay, I'm going to move the waves over a little bit so we get enough of that I should delete. Okay, so there we go. That's the basic idea of automation. It can help you layer stuff together a lot more precisely than just using the little fade in and fade out boxes. And you can also play with the pan. You can do this with effects and other things as well. I won't get into that right now because it's a little bit more complex, but that's the kind of the basic idea. Okay, I'm gonna hide this thing again. And so we've done a little bit of automation. The next thing we're gonna look at is just our mix track down here. So we haven't really looked at it very much, but we have this mix track. So everything that we're putting goes into this, into one mix, which we mix down into a file. And you can actually kind of like group things together and mix them before you go to the main mix, but there's always going to be one main mix that we have to do before we go to the final file. And we can actually add effects on this mix. So just like we did when we were working with the voice, we did some compression, stuff like that. We can add some effects to the mix that will put everything into this one effect. And so that's another good place to use compression to kind of like create a band of loudness that matches, kind of brings some stuff down, brings some stuff up, just keeps it in one area. You could add reverb on the whole track. There's other stuff we could do. So what I'm going to do is add in, you could also do filter and EQ. There's a lot of stuff we could do here. I'm going to add in a dynamics, and I'm going to go back to our compressor, but I'm not going to do quite as extreme. So let's see if there's a good, no, I'm not, I'm going to skip those. So let's just go to the default. Okay, so let's turn on our compressor. And what I want to do to get this is just choose a section where we hear all of our sources together and just loop it so I can start to hear the difference. So I've just turned the compressor on. Let's turn it off first, actually.
Welcome to the MMP 100 podcast. Welcome.
Okay, so let's turn our compressor on and let's set the ratio a little higher. Let's say like 2. And we'll see if we can hear any difference.
To the MMP 100 podcast. Welcome to the MMP.
So I think the voice is coming up a little bit because the voice is a little bit quieter than our other tracks. So it's compensating the voice a little bit there. And let's do a makeup. Let's do like a 3. And let's take a look at the monitor down here.
MMP 100.
Okay, so let's turn the compressor off and see where our monitor is.
Welcome to the MMP 100.
It's not so bad. It's
podcast.
around -12. If I turn the compressor back on, let's see what
Welcome
happens.
to the MMP 100 podcast.
Okay, it's about the same place. So let's actually bring it up. We can start getting a little bit closer to 0. We don't want to get all the way to 0, but we want a loud track when we finally mix it down.
Cast. Welcome to the MMP 100 podcast.
Okay, that's pretty good. I think we can push it even a little bit more. I'll do like 12.
Cast.
That's too high. Okay, so let's maybe go to 8.
Welcome to the MMP 100 podcast.
So that sounds pretty good. So we can add a little bit of compression on there. We can always add a limiter. That will sort of set like a hard cap for how loud something could be. So if I have like if I have a really loud compression for some reason that's peaking a lot, I can go to my limiter and set the limiter to like -3. And then
welcome to
you see there's that hard limit
the
at
MMP
-3.
100 podcast. Welcome to.
So sometimes we use a compressor and a limiter together. We want to push the volume with the compressor, but then we want to make sure that we're not getting too crazy with the limiter. So I might set the limiter even to like -6.
The MMP 100 podcast. Welcome to the MMP 100 podcast. Welcome to.
So I think that's sounding pretty good. It's getting a slight bit distorted. So I think we've got too much compression. We're pushing the compression too much. So let's set that to 10.
MMP 100 podcast. Welcome to.
Okay, I think that's pretty good. So that's a good example of an effect that we can add on our mix, which will be applied to everything that we use. There's other stuff that you might want to do here. You could do some EQ. You could do delay and echo. I don't think that's going to work really right here. There's a lot of other effects you could add, so you could play around with some of those. But I think a basic compressor, basic limiter is a really good thing to add at sort of the tail end of your mix. So yeah, that's some basic layering and mixing. We're going to, in the next video, we're going to submit the assignment, but since we're in Audition right now, let's go ahead and mix down our final version of our audio, and we'll save our final session. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Export, and I'm going to do a mix down, entire session, and I'm going to browse, and what did I call this before? Editing mixdown. So I'm gonna call this editing mixdown. This is number 3. I'll turn off markers, export, and then I'm gonna export this session as well. So I'm gonna export the session, and let's make a new folder for this so it's not in our previous folder like I did last time. We'll call this submission 3, and that's fine. Okay. So now we have in our folder, our project folder, we have our final mixdown, editing mixdown 3, and our final submission with our session and all of our files. And so now we're ready to go. In the next video, we'll submit this on OpenLab and Brightspace, and we'll do our whole audio project breakdown. So I'll see you in the next video.